elect people, when we elect people, do you think we're going to elect from the extremes? No. And this is what we faced in the last presidential election. Where was Hillary? Was she on the liberal or conservative side? Liberal. And where was Trump? And that's what we're seeing actually in this next senator race. That is, Beto is on which side? The left, and Ted Cruz is on the right. And what usually happens when we have elections is the guy who's going to win, is he closer to the right, the left, or in the middle? The middle. The person who will always win is closer to the middle. So what we're going to look at is the Electoral College in this first election. Remember, the Electoral College at this time does not have political parties, because the political party does not develop until question 17 on your study guide, because of the Bank of the United States, not because of George. Okay? What we're going to see is that people are going to choose in the middle. And who do y'all know should be in the middle that we choose? The first president. George Washington. He's actually unanimously selected because George is right smack in the political spectrum middle. But the problem with the Electoral College is that he runs and he gets the unanimous election. What don't we have? A vice president, because the way the Electoral College worked at this time, whoever wins first place gets president, whoever wins second place becomes, because we don't have parties. We're not going to develop party tickets up until like Jackson's time. And then the Gilded Age, you'll formally see people having a vice president. So like Trump, when he ran, his vice president was who? Pence. We don't see that party ticket. And so the Electoral College, it failed in the first election. So they're going to have to run a re-election. And I want you to tell me some founding fathers I could possibly put on this spectrum so we could realize their beliefs. Who are some founding fathers? John Adams. Okay, what do y'all think? Do y'all think he's liberal or conservative? Conservative. He's conservative. John Adams is over here, close to the middle. Who else can I put up here? Hamilton and Ben Franklin. Okay, what did we say Hamilton was in the Constitutional Convention? Liberal? No, what was he in the convention? Remember, people would get heated, and what did he do? Calmed everybody down. So is he liberal or conservative? He's calming down both sides. Okay, you're saying he's neutral and he's in the middle. If he's a guy bringing both sides, do y'all now agree he's in the middle? So he should really be our next vice president. I'm just putting BF for Ben Franklin. But at this time, he's over 75 years old. Do you think they want to elect someone? No, and he's more interested in being in France than anywhere else. So he's not going to get elected. Tell me some other people who could possibly run. Okay, what do y'all think? Is he liberal or conservative? Liberal. We're going to put him close to the middle. Thomas Jefferson. Who are some other liberal people I know or conservative people I know? Someone was saying Hamilton. Where would y'all put Hamilton? Conservative. Conservative. Hamilton's over here. Way over here. Who else could I put? We have John Adams, so who's his cousin? Samuel Adams, who owned a tavern in the Revolution. Is he liberal or conservative? Liberal. Liberal. So Sam Adams is over here. What about Thomas Paine? Where could I put him?
Conservative.
You think Thomas Paine, who's riling up the revolution? No, where would I put him? He's liberal. Okay, what about Henry Knox?
Conservative.
He's conservative. He wants a big military. So what's going to happen? Oops, forgot that. What's going to happen is they rerun the election. Hamilton actually can't run because he's not even an American citizen. He was born in the British Barbados. Okay, so looking at this, they run the election. We vote closest to the middle. We already said Ben Franklin rather be in France. So who becomes the next vice president? John Adams. Eventually, John Adams will become the next what? And then who becomes the third president? They're closest to the middle. And so if they ever do this on the next election, whoever's in the middle is going to win. So now looking at here, Washington's inaugurated, John Adams is his vice president, and this brings us to question 1 on the study guide. In the Constitution, it said he could have a vice of state. So he calls people up, right? Did it say he could have a formal cabinet? No. So is he interpreting the Constitution strictly or loosely? Loose. He has a very loose interpretation. And so what he's going to do is he's going to formalize and create a cabinet. Looking at this list, who is he going to make his Secretary of State? Thomas Jefferson, because Adams already has a job, right? And looking at that, isn't he picking close to the middle? Hey, who's the next one? Secretary of Treasury. Hamilton, because he needs someone conservative, because tell me about our economy. Is it good? What's happening to our money? Depreciating in value. Are we paying back our debts? We need someone conservative to come in and handle this. So our screen decided to go dead because it couldn't handle the debt. I could only know the debt right now. Okay, so who did y'all say was our Secretary of Treasury? That goes with question 1. I'm just going to put Ham. Y'all know what I mean, right? Secretary of War. Knox. So which way is Washington leaning? Conservative. He's going to be a loose interpretation. And the biggest problem that he's going to look in his cabinet is we have debt. Our money is failing. We owe who money? French. And so he charges Hamilton with dealing with his biggest issue, which is our currency, our economy. And so what you need to pull out is your other set of notes. It says Hamilton's Financial Bank. Program, sorry, wrong name. So I don't want you to write any more on that note set. We're going to look at this and I'm going to erase that stuff. We had a lot of issues on our homework in dealing with what is going on, right? Huh? You can highlight it. You don't have to highlight, okay? So what we're going to look at is Hamilton has to deal with the debt. He has to deal with our credit. He has to deal with our money. Is it valuable or invaluable? Okay, and so what he's going to do, the first thing is he's going to look at our national debt. And you did a reading on Shays. Who did we owe money to? Farmers, because they were our veterans in the war, right? And a lot of them went home from our Continental Congress with IOUs. Okay, so Jonah had this IOU. He was part of the Shayistas. He goes home. Can this IOU pay for his house? Can it pay for his taxes? No, that IOU is worth $1,000. But does our government at this time have from 1776 to about 1789? That is how many years is he holding on to this paper? 1776 to 1789. 13 years. Is he getting upset? So what he decides to do, it's $1,000. Does this thing have value? Yes, but he needs money now so he doesn't lose his home, he doesn't lose his dog, he doesn't lose his fish and his wife, right? So he's going to sell this to a speculator, Evan. Do you think Evan wants to pay $1,000 for this paper? No, so he offers him half the paper money. He says, I'll give you $500. Is Jonah going to take it in that 13-year span? He takes it, he pays for his house, he keeps his dog, he keeps his wife, right? Happy life. This guy over here is sitting with his IOU. So tell me who's the poor guy in this situation? The veteran, right? Who's the rich guy? The speculator. And so now Alexander Hamilton has to deal with the Evan issue. People like Evan, speculators, have all these papers. And he said, we're going to pay our national debt. Originally, it's owed to France, and it's owed to veterans. But what have most veterans done with those IOUs? Sold them. To who? Speculators. And we're going to deal with the foreign one for France, and we're going to deal with our domestic one to our veterans, but do the veterans really have it anymore? And so they said, we're going to take these certificates of indebtedness, that's a certificate of indebtedness, and pay it at full value. That is what at par means on question 6. At full value. Is Evan happy? Why are you happy, Evan, now? he only paid 500, but what is he getting now? 1,000. So that was the second question. Who benefited from funding at par? Was it the veteran farmer? No, it was the what? Speculator. Is he a rich man or a poor man? So this is what we have to get from this story. That these IOUs are going to be sold from the veterans to the speculators. Who is Hamilton making happy in society? The farmers and the veterans, or the rich bankers and speculators?
The rich bankers and speculators.
And he said, if I make those people happy like Evan, are they going to want our nation to be successful? Or are they going to want our nation to wither away and die? So they could get what paid back? The money, the debt that they're owed. So this is why funding at par is such a significant thing of Hamilton's financial plan. Did y'all see where it is on 6? Y'all got it? Some of y'all realize I had that wrong, but now I got it right. So what we're going to look at is the next thing, the assumption of state debts. Okay, this assumption of state debts, he says it's a national obligation. When we went from the articles, who had the most power? States. And now we're going to the Constitution, where the states are having to give up their power to who? The federal government. And he says, if I were to take on all their debt, just like your parents do you kind of have to listen to them? And this is why he said, assuming the state debt is good. Because if they take away all the debts from the states, will the states have to listen to the federal government? That is for number 7. Why did he feel it was an obligation? It would chain the states to the federal government. Y'all got 7 now, right? So there are some states who are really upset. What was the state that was really upset? Virginia, because it already paid off with all its debt. So Hamilton's going to make an agreement with Virginia. We will move the capital next to you to be able for you to agree with this. Do they like that? Yes, this is why Washington, D.C. is between Maryland and Virginia. We used to have a floating capital before this, that it would move around. Okay, are y'all good with 2 now? The assumption of the debts. It's going to make who listen? The states. The third thing, we're going to put a tariff on imports. Who does that help? Does it help the consumers who are buying foreign stuff, or does that help the domestic producers? And us, if we're all consumers back then, what happens to price? Goes up. And so who do you think is going to be upset about? The rich Evan speculator or the farmer Jonah? And again, who do all these benefit of what I've gone through? Is it helping the farmer Jonah, or is it helping the rich people out? And so this whole financial plan is going to lead to the creation of the political parties. Hey, let's go to the next one. The excise tax. I need a farmer. Who wants to be a farmer? Okay, Farmer Jonah still over here. He didn't lose his house, because what did he do with his certificate of indebtedness? Sold it to Evan. So he still has his farm. He's a wheat farmer. But to transfer wheat, is that something very difficult to transport? Because he has to plow his field, and what does he have to do with all that wheat? Bale it, and it comes into this huge circular thing. Put that bale where? To get it to market, what does he have to do? On a wagon, get a horse, but are there roads?
No.
So does he have to get a sturdy horses, and a wagon? So is it expensive for him to get wheat to market? Yes. So Jonah has the idea that he could do something else with that wheat. He's going to distill it and make whiskey. Is that easier to transport? Yes, because you put whiskey. I don't know how y'all know this, but we're just assuming that y'all have just heard this before in 8th grade. He distills his whiskey and he puts it in what? Barrels or what?
Kegs.
Bottles. Okay. Is that easier to transport?
Yes.
Okay, versus that big, huge hay bale, right? So why did he make it into whiskey? It was what for him? Easier to transport, and what else? Cheaper. But what Hamilton is going to do is he's going to put an excise tax on whiskey. Is Jonah upset again?
Yes.
Because this guy, not only is he costing all goods to go up in price, not only is he not getting paid back his IOU in full, But now he's being taxed on the whiskey he was purposely making to make it cheaper for him. So, do you think we're going to have another rebellion?
Yes.
Yes. But it's a little bit different this time than Shays. The last thing he's going to do is establish a Bank of the United States. He says the government has the right to coin money, so it should have the right to put that money somewhere and earn interest off of it versus a bank. Okay, who do you think is going to be able to put money in that bank? Farmer Jonah or speculator Evan?
Speculator.
So this whole thing, who does this whole policy benefit? The rich people. And this is going to lead to the creation of what? Political parties. So Hamilton, he's going to say the national debt is a blessing. Because who does it tie to believing in our government? The farmer or the rich man? The rich man. He says if we have the rich backing our government will excel. So that's for 8. On 9, he says let's propose how to pay off debt. We have the tariff. Who is that going to charge more? The poor people or the rich people?
Poor.
And this excise tax, who is that going to charge more to?
The whiskey makers.
The whiskey makers that are going to get very upset and they're going to get inebriated and they're going to have a revolution, right? Okay, so he said the purpose of the bank would basically it's going to pay off the government debt, right? But is it going to benefit one class of people? Who is it going to benefit? The rich. Okay, so we're going to see opposition to his plan comes from, on 11, y'all said Thomas Jefferson. He was against the bank. And there's several reasons why people are against the bank and his plan. Farmer Jonah, does he get paid back his $500? Who gets paid back the $500? The speculator. We see the assumption of states' debts upsetted Virginia. We're seeing the excise tax only hurts what type of farmers? The poor farmers who were making their wheat into what? And then the last thing, the National Bank gave too much power to a central entity that only allowed who to bank there? The rich people. And so we're going to see that Hamilton's plan, it's going to have several effects. It's going to, one of the things is our credit's going to become more stable. Didn't we need that? The next thing, the government revenues are met, it could pay off its debts. Did we need that? The last thing, commerce and industry are stimulated because they could go to a bank and borrow money. And is that going to lead to more Americans being hired? The last two things, the government wants support from the influential businessman. Who is hating this? The poor farmers. The last thing, this influenced the development of political parties. That was question 17. Why did parties develop? Because of the resentment to Hamilton's policies, right? So you have another sheet. Do y'all understand the funding at par and all this stuff a little bit better now? Okay, y'all have another sheet. Let me find it. If I can find my mouse. Okay, y'all have a sheet that looks like this, right? Because of what event do we get the creation of this parties? What event? This is because the parties are created because of whose plan? And I'm going to put in here the Bank of the U.S., or I call it the bus, just to make it quick. So, Evan and Jonah, we're going to classify them in a second. We're going to look at these characteristics. Hamilton's party feels they're the Federalists, the rule by the best people. What do you mean best people? Rich or poor? They didn't want extension of democracy to who? The farmers. They wanted a powerful central government. They wanted a loose interpretation. Was the bank even in the Constitution? No, that's a loose interpretation. They wanted a government to foster business. They wanted a protective tariff. They were pro-British. They felt debt was a blessing because who would invest in the nation? The rich. They wanted expanding the bureaucracy, a powerful central government restrictions on freedom of speech and press, and a central, they were mainly on the coast. Well, is this Farmer Evan? Is this Farmer Jonah or Speculator Evan? Okay, so let's look at the other side. This is going to be Farmer Jonah on this side. We're going to see they want rule by the informed masses, which we should have seen in Shays' Rebellion, right? When Jefferson said the question, I would rather have a government or no government without paper, with newspapers. What did he say? Newspapers, right? Informed masses. He says he wanted friendliness towards the extension of democracy. For who? Farmers. He wanted a weak central government. States' rights. He wanted strict interpretation. So was he for this bus? No, because it wasn't in the Constitution. He wanted no special favors for business. What guy does he feel that is doing special favors for business? What guy is creating this plan that favors the rich? Hamilton. He's pro-French. He says the debt is obeyed. We should not be going into debt. He encouraged the state banks. He wants free speech, and they're mainly in the South, in the back country. Now we have political parties, because remember when we did the Constitutional Convention, we had Federalist and Anti-Federalist. Those were factions. These are true parties. Who do you think the Federalist goes best with, the Federalist or the Democratic Republicans?
Democratic.
The Federalists, who do they go best with? They want a big government under the Constitutional Convention. Which one does the Federalist go best with? Hamilton. Which one does the Anti-Federalist go best with? Jefferson. Those factions will later become our parties. And I always think the Democrat Republicans I have here go into our Democrats that we know today. But are our Democrats today about small state government? No. Our Federalists over here become our Republicans. They still believe in benefiting the big business, right? But do they believe in a big government today? There's going to be an event that flips the government and how they believe in. It isn't until Roosevelt in the Great Depression that our Republicans go away from big government to what? Small. And our Democrats go away from small to big. But that doesn't happen until the 1932 election. So for the next 132 years, this is the way you have to know politics. It's flipped from the government that we believe in today for those parties. Y'all got that? Okay, so now what we're going to look at is we're going to go back to our notes on, we were on Hamilton's party stuff, right? So I said that the parties are well defined. What two parties do we have? And not anti-federalist, because that's a faction from the Constitutional Convention. We have the Democratic Republicans. Which one believes in big government? Which one believes in small states' rights? Okay, so I have all of this blacked out right here because this is all foreign policy that I've written on the foreign policy notes. Let's look at the Whiskey Rebellion. Why are those farmers upset? Excise tax for distilling their wheat into what? So they all start to protest in Pennsylvania because that's where our breadbasket is, right? But the difference about our government under whiskeys is we're under the Constitution. Under the Articles, did we have a military? Did we have courts at the federal level? Did we have an executive? Now we're looking at the Constitution. Do they have a military? Do they have an executive that could command that military? Do they have a court system that could deal with them? And so Jonah with his other people in the Whiskey Rebellion, they rise up. They get wind that Washington has sent in the military. Do you think they stay around? No, they disperse. So what does Whiskey Rebellion tell us about the Constitution? Did it work or did it not? It did. When we looked at Shays, did the Articles work under Shays? No. But under Whiskey's Rebellion, it will tell us that the Constitution works. I want us to look at the Battle of Fallen Timbers. We saw this on 23 on our study guide. The Battle of Fallen Timbers was going on because the English were giving the Indians what? Weapons in exchange for what? What did the Indians give them in exchange? Fur. And so as our settlers were moving west, what was happening to them? They were being killed and attacked by the Indians. And so Washington's administration has sent some generals out to the Battle of Fallen Timbers to deal with the Indians. But the Indians have weapons, right? So can they at least deal with the Americans? And so what will happen is we're going to see the British are going to help the Indians. They're not going to help the Indians. So will the Indians, do they have an advantage anymore? And so this is going to lead to a treaty called the Treaty of Grenville, which I don't know why I have it. It should be out there. Basically, we come to a new precedent. Anytime we take land away from Indians, what are we going to give them? Money. Because all of these Native American tribes actually had title to that land. Can I ruin a title or a contract? No, so when we give them money, they're going to re-sign that contract. So that's what the Treaty of Grenville does. The Indians, they're going to give up their land in the Northwest Territory in exchange for what? Money. And this is how we're going to deal with Native American groups every single time because they have title to that land, and we'll see more of it next unit. How do y'all feel about Battle of Fallen Timbers and the Treaty of Grenville? Okay, what we're going to look at now is our issues with the foreigners. Okay, so Hamilton will eventually resign. Washington will see the foreign address in our foreign notes. So do y'all see the foreign notes? They're all written out for y'all. It says Foreign Policy, Washington and Adams. Okay, so we have a couple of issues. Our first issue deals with France. What haven't we paid them back? Their debts. They've helped us out in the American Revolution, and now they're having the French Revolution. Are we kind of scared in America? Because if we help them out with their war, what would they expect from us? The same thing, right? We would help them out. And they also probably, if they're in a revolution, what do they need? Money. And so George Washington knows at this time, are we economically strong yet?
No.
Are we militarily strong? Politically, are we even united?
No.
Why do y'all say no? What event creates two parties? Bang. He says we're politically not united. Tell me the two parties that are created. Federalists and Democratic Republicans. So he declares our neutrality and that we're going to go against the Franco-American alliance. What group likes the Franco-American alliance and wants to help the French? Democratic Republicans. So that's an 18th. So Washington believed that we shouldn't help because we are militarily weak, economically weak, politically weak. What happens after his neutrality proclamation where he says we're not helping anybody out, which we saw on 20, there's this guy named Citizen Genet. He's a French dude. And he realizes I could come to America and convince them. Do you think he's going to go to the northeast seacoast or is he going to go to the south? Because the south is mainly what? Democratic Republican. And he's going to come down south to get men and supplies. Is he openly defying the neutrality pact? And so Washington, has he ever had a bad instance with a French person? Yes. When he killed the guy which led to the French and Indian War. So if he kills Genet and puts him in prison, could he possibly have another war with the French?
Yes.
So he says, look, we're just going to deport this guy. Get him out of here so we don't have a war. Is Washington trying to get involved in wars?
No.
Our next issue, and it's actually 3 problems a lot of y'all were missing on 22. We had 3 problems with the English. Who were they arming in the western frontier? Native Americans. And they're on our forts. So I know it says 3. They're on the forts in the frontier 1. They are arming the Native Americans 2. And 3, they're seizing our ships, which is called impressment. That doesn't mean to impress and like have good swag or anything like that. What impressment means is they're going into these boats. And they're like, oh, this guy. He's on an American boat, but he looks English. He's a deserter. And they're stealing him. It's called man-snatching, impressment. Is there any way we could tell the difference between him and an English dude? And an American dude? No, because we have the same genetic makeup because a lot of them have come from there. And so they're impressing. What does this mean, impressing again? Stealing our men and also stealing our cargo. Are they respecting the independence of the United States? No, they're on our land, they're arming the Indians, and they're stealing our men. And so Washington agrees that we can't go to war with Great Britain. Because were we kind of lucky on winning the last one? Yes, because the French were there. Do we have the French to help us? So he sends John Jay over. John Jay wants him to get us to leave the forts, stop arming the Indians, and stop the impressment. So let's look at the treaty. The British promised to leave the forts. Do you think they're going to leave the forts? They will pay back damages from ships. What did we want them to stop doing? They fall short of the impressment. The third thing is that we promised to pay back our debts to the British merchants before the Revolution. Can we even do that? Why not? Tell us about our economy. We're broke, right? And so the South is outraged because we're dealing with the English and not the French. The important thing about this is this delays war for 20 years. This will eventually lead us to the War of 1812, which we'll get into next unit. Okay, how do y'all feel with our British stuff now and Jay's treaty? It's on your notes. Yeah, this is just red, and it only lets me print out in black. Okay.
I don't have glasses, so it's all blurry.
It's all blurry, you know, that's usually a Monday, so I'm sorry that your Thursday is blurry. Okay, so let's look at Spain. In the Treaty of Paris, Spain promised that they could let us use the river. Are they letting us use the Mississippi? So that's our problem with them, but they start to freak out that we have gone to the British, and they're freaking out about an Anglo-American alliance. They said, oh my gosh, they're negotiating. Maybe they're going to gang up against us and fight us. So because of Jay's treaty, this is why Pinckney's treaty comes out. Would Pinckney's treaty ever have come out if we didn't negotiate with the British? So that's the only highlight of Jay's treaty, even though Jay's treaty did anything actually resolve from that. But because of Jay's treaty, we get this great treaty called Pinckney's treaty, that it gives free access to the Mississippi and New Orleans to the Americans. Are our farmers happy?
Yes.
Because is it cheaper to ship something or put it on a horse with a buggy?
Sure.
And so this is why this is a great treaty. It's important for frontier trade. Washington's done. He's like, oh my gosh, 2 terms, I'm done. And he established the precedent that every president after him will go 2 terms. We actually don't have the 22nd Amendment, which says a president could only serve 2 terms or 10 years. So what we're going to look at is his farewell address, which y'all have, and I promise this document is on your test, so this is why we're looking at it. So it says, to the people of the United States, every president will take on this example after Washington of writing a letter after their leaving office. He says, election time is near, and I have decided not to run for another term. Was there anything in the Constitution that limited him at this time? He could have kept on going up until the 22nd Amendment, which we'll get in the 1950s. He says, I am ready to retire. Here perhaps I should stop, but I'm concerned about the country's welfare, and I want to give you some advice. He says, 1, our greatest strength lies in security lies in our unity. Washington, are we even united at this time?
No.
What can y'all tell me that we don't have unity? What has developed? Parties. He says, be careful. Enemies will try to separate us. 2, avoid occasions of spending. Who's the guy who's spending a lot right now? Hamilton. What's that? What did he decide to do with all debts? Fund them at what? Par, at full value. He says to achieve this, seek the maintenance of peace. However, do not forget, money spent preparing for danger frequently prevents expensive wars. If debts occur, repay them quickly. It is not fair to burden later generations with your debts. Oh, how wise Washington is, right? We're sitting in 22 trillion of debt, right? If only people would have listened to him back then. 3 says treat all nations equally. Oh, who are we not treating equally? France. We have denied the Franco-American alliance. Who are we going and negotiating treaties with? The British. And then the Spanish, right? Are we really treating them equally? He says, cultivate peace and harmony with all. Ooh, gosh. Who are we not cultivating peace with? French, right? Because we're not going with the Franco-American alliance. We're not paying back our debts. He says, avoid alliances except emergencies. Alliance could involve us in foreign affairs which are not our best interests. Europe has many political interests. Therefore, European nations are frequently engaged in controversies, the causes which are no concern of ours. Our great distance from Europe allows us to remain separate from European affairs. Therefore, it is senseless for us to form permanent alliances with European nations. He says, being too negative in your dealings with the country, this could result in us being too quick to criticize and insult, which might lead to war. This is against our best interests. Being too positive towards a country is also dangerous. Sympathy can lead to participation in their wars. It also leads us to granting special privileges, which annoys another nations. If we remain united and eventually be powerful enough to make other nations pay attention to our desire for neutrality. So what is Washington? What is the big point in 3? Stay out of what? War. Alliances. Don't go to war. Is it costly? Yes. He's trying to make us be neutral. Was he trying to be neutral with the French? Yeah, and he didn't kill Genet, right? He just sent him home. Lastly, he said trade equally with all nations. Foreign, as in foreign affairs, have no favorites. Do not make extensive trade agreements with other nations, just those necessary to stabilize the economy. Is Washington fearful that we could possibly be going to war over issues with trade? And is he fearful that our nation is divided? Yes. So this is everything that he's looking at, and he's hoping that his predecessor doesn't lead us into war. So there's Washington's farewell address. He warned us against making permanent alliances, neutrality, and honor trade agreements. He says this has kept us out of European affairs. So do you think Adams is going to listen? No. And one of the first things that happens under the Adams administration is the French are impressing our ships. What does impressing mean? Stealing what? Men and our cargo. So Adams, in an effort of neutrality, sends 3 dignitaries to go and negotiate with the French foreign minister, the Talleyrand. But the Talleyrand doesn't want to meet with them. He sends 3 go-betweens called X, Y, and Z. They're French names, so our Americans come home, I don't know, they're X, Y, and Z, okay? And these 3 go-betweens said, if you want to talk to the Talleyrand, you must pay a huge bribe. Tell me about the economic standing of America at this time. We're broke. Do we have enough to pay this bribe?
No.
And Adams is what? Was he a conservative or a liberal when I put up that spectrum? So now, is he a Federalist or a Democratic Republican? Federalist. He's a Federalist, and these Federalists, they're looking at this. How dare the French ask us for money? And they want to go to war. They come home with their hearts inflamed that the French have insulted them. And so Adams says, we're not going to go to war, but we're going to prepare. Didn't that what Washington said? Sometimes preparing for war is a good deterrent. So we create the Navy and the Marine Corps because of what happens in the XYZ affair. We have an undeclared naval war. So what's happening to our boats by the French? They're impressing our men and stealing our what? Cargo. So the Federalists are going to go to Congress and they're going to try to pass some laws to deal with what party would be so upset that we have an undeclared naval war? Democratic Republicans, because they're pro who? French. So they're going to pass some laws in Congress that is going to try to deal with this. And this was 37 about the 35 and 36, the Alien and Sedition Act. So, do we have the Naturalization Act on there? Oh no, we didn't. But let me explain the Naturalization Act. Immigrants, they're coming to this country, and to obtain citizenship, usually it was a 5-year waiting period. Now it's gone up to 14 years. I want you to think, what party would most of these immigrants be a part of? The Federalists, the rich guys, or the Democratic Republicans, common farmers?
Democratic Republican.
Okay, so if they have to wait 14 years for those people to join their ranks, what would happen to the power of the Democratic Party? If they had to wait 14 years, would it go up their power or would it go down? Down, temporarily, right? And so, do you think that the Federalists are passing these laws to hurt the Democrats?
Yes.
The next thing on here is the Alien Act, that the president can deport dangerous foreigners in times of peace and war. Does this go back to Janae?
Yes.
Okay, the last one, sedition. Sedition is just a nice SAT word for speech. If anybody spoke out against the Alien Act or the Naturalization Act, the president had the right to put you in jail or fine you. So tell me what party is going to get upset about that Sedition Act, that they can't talk out against these rules?
Democratic Republican.
They're going to say this violates what amendment right? The first. And so can Jefferson, can Madison come out and talk against this stuff? So, can they? Can they? No, because what's going to happen to them?
They get a huge fine.
They get a huge fine. So Jefferson and Madison are going to respond by secretly writing some resolutions. Jefferson from Virginia, Kentucky is Madison. And they come back with this thing called the Compact Theory, which was 38 on your study guide. The Compact Theory states that the states created the national government. Is that more articles or more constitution?
More constitution.
The states had the power to create the national government. Articles, right? The states were the first ones. And so the states, they could rule on whether the government has overstepped their authority. It's called nullification. That if a state doesn't like a federal law, they can nullify it. Who does that give power to? The states. This is the argument that will lead us to the Civil War. And Jefferson has created it a whole 50 years before the Civil War. And anytime the southern states feel that the federal government has gone over their authority, what are they going to do to the laws? Nullify it. Jefferson has he caused the Civil War right here? Yes, by creating the idea. What is the laws that they feel that they should be able to invalidate? Sedition Act, what else? Alien Act, and what else? Because they all gear only at one party. Do they hurt the Federalists? No, they're created to benefit the Federalists at the expense of the Democratic Republicans. So the Federalists said that the people, not the states, created the federal government. So are the Democratic Republicans going to be upset in the next election?
Yes.
And they're going to rile up forces to get voting. What will eventually happen in the Convention of 1800 is the Talleyrand agrees to meet our citizens, and we see now Napoleon's in power. Does Napoleon even want to deal with the U.S.? No, because he's concentrating on conquest of Europe. So we see that they ended the Franco-American alliance. We agree to pay our own damages. But are the Democratic Republicans still upset about the Federalist laws?
Yes.
And this is going to lead to why Adams will only serve one term. Adams will lose to Thomas Jefferson. And this is considered a revolution because every single time in history, when we talk about one government falling and another government rising, what has usually happened in world history? A revolution, bloodshed. Is there going to be any bloodshed when Adam loses and Thomas Jefferson comes to power? No. It is a bloodless revolution. It is a peaceful transfer of power. Okay? And so, This is the first time in history, and we'll later see this with Brazil when King João lets his son Pedro come to power without revolution. But this is a bloodless revolution. So the Federalists, this is the last time we'll see them because they'll actually die out. Right? They'll be replaced by another party. But they created financial stability. Who was the guy who created the financial stability? Hamilton, with the financial plan and the creation of the bank. We see they created a strong central government. They also created a peaceful election process where Adam gives up, right? And actually his son will have the same fate as him. There'll only be one term because of the bad economy. And we see they create the stepping stone between monarchy and democracy. So, do y'all understand our notes a little bit better? Okay? Do y'all see where y'all had blanks? Did we fix them? Where you don't have to rewrite them? So did I go through every single paper now? Because I'm trying to think. Okay. Yes. What we're going to do now is I'm going to hand you out the review quiz. I only want you to